And so getting back to Javanese, why this island is important is I came across this gentleman. Basically, all of the people that look similar. I was trying to figure out if the Americans were from Asia, who could they be from? And I'm just looking at old photos, black and whites, you name it. And because the reason I did that is because there's accounts of bearded tribes. Now, the problem with these accounts of bearded tribes is they never say what color eyes they have. So I wonder if it's bullshit or not. That being said, they also have so-called tribes of, they call them Negroes back then because it wasn't a bad word. It wasn't politically correct. It just means black, right? So we can call somebody black, but we can't call them black in another language because that's offensive, whatever the fuck that's about. But these tribes of Negroes were already here. And the Javanese fit the description because if you look at the people of Java, there's an island. This is what made me look into this because they look like a blend of Asian, Indian. They look like all of them. They're like an amalgamation. It's hard to explain until you want to go for your audience. Go look up Javanese or Java and Google Images and just start looking at old pictures. It's fascinating. But the reason I looked into this is because there's an island that was noted in a fictional Arabic story that was said to exist in the Sea of China, and it was called Oaxaca. Now, an Arabic explorer in he lived in like the 9th and 10th centuries, like the end of so like let's say the 9th century. I think he died in like 912 AD. But he mentioned Oaxaca, writing that the islands are so rich in gold that the inhabitants make the chains for their dogs and the collars for their monkeys of this metal. And they manufacture tunics woven in gold. And excellent ebony wood is found in this island. And gold and ebony are the main export, or they were exported from Oaxaca. Now, he seemed to believe that, even though it was a fictional story. But then literally over like 500 years later, a Portuguese apothecary named Tome Pires wrote of Java, actual Java, real, not writing of a fictional story. He said, they had many fine hounds with collars and rings of gold and silver. Now, me speculating, Oaxaca is so phonetically similar to Oaxaca and Mexico. So once you remove that al, Oaxaca becomes Oaxaca. And this is really interesting because it bridges the affinity of the language between the Indians and the Americans. And there's a lot of people that would say, well, yeah, but that X in Mexico is pronounced like an H. The reason I looked at this is because the second word of Oaxaca is Xaca, an old name for Buddha, Xaca, which begets the Saki, which begets the Saxons. The Latin word for stone, saxum, Saxum. Well, I will remind all those people that would say I'm, going a little too far into the speculating, that Mexico was named after their leader, Messi, Mesi.
Oh, wait, you mean like
Mexico?
You mean like the Moshe? You mean like Moses?
Yeah.
You mean Messiah?
Yep, all of it. The
anointed?
And that's why their religious rites are this is what I'm saying. Remember how we were talking pre-show about what the deciding factor is. Do we as people just create these things and we're running the same I don't know.
Yeah, is it like this innate archetypal thing that comes through us and that's why there's this syncretic thing? Or is it one system that it all derives from originally?
Well, that the bizarre rites, that's what for me seals the deal that it's an old system. It's the bizarre rites. It's not the because I understand people, well, if we're all running a similar biological software, we're going to tend to think similar. We're going to tend to create similar, systems perhaps. But when you start seeing the bizarre religious rites, whether it's the linga worship, right? Like, you see the Muslims going into India and destroying everything, but leaving the simple images of Buddha and leaving the linga, the phallus, that symbolism intact. You see that phallic symbolism in every major city that's controlled by the solar cult. What I was going to say is there's mathematical certainty. So going back to what I was saying about how like the language in Ireland, Rome, Sanskrit, and English, when you see it all being the same, there gets to a point where it's a mathematical impossibility after, I think, 8 words.
All right, people. So we had a little bit of a technological glitch, but here we are. About an hour later, but still determined to keep this thing going. We've kind of gone over the first hour time window, so you're welcome for that, everybody. But Dylan's going to continue where we left off, talking about the mathematical improbability of languages sharing words, and we'll finish some thoughts, but then expand further in the direction we're on here when we hit the second hour.
Perfect. And to the audience, I'm going to be looking down just because I took out my mic because I think that was the software was slowing my computer down. And that's why it crashed. So it's not personal that I'm not looking at you. But the point that I was making in all the stuff we were talking about, going back to these Javans, the Javanese, is that they were a bridge between cultures that used symbols and numerals as letters in the alphabet. So even if that island I was telling you about, Oaxaca, that idea, if that's nonsense, the suspicion of the Javanese being connected to the Americans is still in play, because you have to decide, how did the American Indians get here? Did they get here by the land bridge, as the status quo told us? Or was there an advanced maritime empire in Asia that was able to get them here? Now, I have a feeling that the Americans were called Indians because the people of the previous ancient maritime empires, whether it's the Carthaginians, anybody in Europe, we don't know what Egypt was at this point, so it could have been them. So whoever they were, and however many, whether it's the ancient Irish, right, the Phoenicians, I think they knew that the Indians or the Americans were actually from India, which is why they called them Indians. I don't think it was a product of Columbus accidentally finding something he thought was India. Anyhow, this quote I wanted to read is from a gentleman named Stanford Raffles, and this is what I believe ties this Mexican culture to the Indian culture. And like I said, just to refresh the audience's memory, the reason this matters is because when they found the Mexican culture, they had the same mythoses as the Christians and Jews. Their dialect was basically Hebrew. They called it corrupt Hebrew, but they didn't have the use of letters, which means it couldn't have been brought by Europeans. Because if the Europeans had brought all that symbolism and stuff and those stories and that language with them, they would have brought the use of letters if it was brought by Christians and Jews. So what he wrote was, for ordinary purposes, the Javans use a modification of some of the letters of the alphabet as numerals. But on occasions of importance, it is usual to employ certain signs or symbols in lieu of these ordinary numerals. And this practice appears to be of great antiquity among them. These symbols consist in a certain number of objects, either represented in design or named, each of which is significant of one of the 10 numerals. Of the former class are said to be those found in the most ancient buildings and coins, which in that case usually bear no inscription.